A few days ago, I was asked to take an interview with one of the most prominent women in our city. Let's call her Mrs. Dalton. She was the wife of a major politician and was greatly involved with other social causes. I had heard that she was a champion for human rights and was doing her most to contribute to society. I had high hopes for the interview, so I asked her secretary and she agreed to do an interview on Saturday morning. 2 hours later, after the confirmation from her secretary, I received a call from a friend of mine who told me that he'll be in my city for a quick visit and would love to grab lunch with me the next day. I was overjoyed and said that I had a restaurant in mind. The next day, I went to the restaurant and waited for my friend. This was the restaurant that my secretary had asked me to conduct an interview in. I guess it was either in Mrs. Dalton's neighborhood or she visited the restaurant frequently. After a few minutes, my friend arrived. We were having fun, and I suddenly felt the urge to go to the washroom, so I quickly excused myself. On my way back, I saw a familiar face. It was Mrs. Dalton. I would have said hi if she knew me. I didn't know her personally, so I thought it would be better to meet each other during the interview itself. She was sitting alone, so I guessed that she didn't want to be disturbed. As I was passing her by, our eyes met, and she waved at me. I went to her and she questioned in a stern voice, "Why are you taking so much time? How long do I have to wait to get my food?" "Oh, did I tell you that I was wearing black trousers and a white shirt?" So I didn't have any idea of the uniform that the waiters wore. If I did, I would have probably chosen a different color. Still, I wasn't wearing any badge and my collar was unbuttoned. I had also cuffed my arm sleeve so I didn't think anyone would presume that I was a waiter. I smiled charmingly, and as soon as I opened my mouth, she yelled, "Why aren't you answering?" "That lady arrived after me, I'm sure of it. So why are you giving away my food to her? I ordered that, you know. But you are making me wait, and then you're giving away the food that I asked for." Without thinking, I just replied, maybe someone else ordered for her. Or maybe multiple people can order the same food. They must be preparing your food. You shouldn't raise your voice at the servers, you know. I felt a splash on my face before I could complete my sentence. My eyelashes were dripping wet. My face felt sticky. My shirt was soaked. I took a handkerchief from my back pocket and wiped my eyes. When I opened it, I saw orange juice all over me, and an angry woman with a glass in her hand was glowering at me. "How dare you talk to me like that?" she rumbled. Then she grabbed me by the collar and demanded that I fix my mistake. "I pay your bills and you dare to speak to me like that?" A waitress quickly approached and asked me what had happened. Then she realized that I wasn't wearing a badge and understood that I was a customer. She handed me some tissues and asked how I could help. The woman sat there scowling when the manager asked her what was wrong. Then she reprimanded the manager and said the same thing that she was saying to me. He explained that the other woman's food was already ordered by someone long before Mrs. Dalton had ordered and that her food would take 5 more minutes to arrive. She rolled her eyes and replied in a monotonous voice, "You should have said that before. Instead, your server had the audacity to lecture me. So I gave him what he so truly deserved." I was surprised to say the least. The magazines painted a picture of an angel. They told everyone that she was incredibly kind and had a sweet demeanor. The truth was far from it. I couldn't believe my eyes. She was purely evil and didn't have a care in the world for other people. I realized that she wasn't the person everyone thought she would be. I went back to my seat and my friend asked me to head back. Then she showed me how he made a video of the whole thing. He told me to post it online and I just had an idea. I called my superior immediately and told her what had happened. I also told her that I had the whole thing recorded. My superior is an extremely creative and intelligent person. She is always bringing in the best ideas, and a major part of our success goes to her. She is treasured by the magazine, and her seniors love and support her ideas. This is the reason why our magazine is always #1 in our state, and under top 3 in the entire country. I go back home after the call and prepare for the interview. A few days later, Saturday finally arrives. I wear my white shirt and black trousers. I wanted to leave an impression, and I wanted her to be on her toes. After all, this interview was very important for her. Her husband was running for mayor in the upcoming elections, and she wouldn't want to attract any negative attention. I headed out a little earlier and sat in the restaurant. I got my recorder and everything in order so I could finish it all quickly. Mrs. Dalton stepped in the restaurant and a waiter ushered her to our table. I smiled and shook hands with her. As she extended her hand, she asked, "Have we met each other before?" I already know she meets 100 people every day. Not literally, but you get the gist. It's possible for her to forget my face, but this happened just 3 days ago, and she had forgotten all about the person she humiliated just because of a misunderstanding. On top of that, she was extremely rude to everyone. Even if she forgot, I would make sure to remind her. I saw her staring at me intently, like she was trying to figure out where she had seen me before. We sat and ordered for ourselves. We asked for a coffee, and I asked for an orange juice. I began with the basic questions. Her upcoming projects, what she was doing, where her family went on vacation, so on. We talked and she was surprisingly on her best behavior. She was being extremely sweet and nice. She asked me if I wanted water when I was continuously speaking. She smiled a lot more and gently treated the servers. It was a whole new side of her that was obviously for the show. Anybody who has seen her true colors once would immediately realize how fake she was. The waitress came with an orange juice and a coffee. She spotted me and greeted me. I immediately recognized her. She was the same waitress who offered me her handkerchief. Upon seeing the waitress's behavior towards me, Mrs. Dalton asked if I was a regular. I hinted to her that I had been in the restaurant only once, and that I met with an unfortunate fate. I didn't spill any details and waited for her to figure it out by herself. Half an hour later, when we were done with all the necessary interview questions, I closed my notebook and asked her if there was something that she would like to share. She kept telling me about her husband and how hardworking he was and all. I was bored as hell because I couldn't see exactly who she was. Nothing she said was interesting anymore. Then I thought of dropping the bomb. I nonchalantly said, "Thankfully we had a good encounter this time. I was worried what I would do if you ended up drenching me in orange juice for the second time." As soon as she heard me, her eyes turned dark. She had realized why I looked so familiar. "Aren't you that waiter from before? The one who was excessively rude?" she abruptly said and scowled. At last, she showed me the face I knew. She looked confused, so I finally revealed that I wasn't a waiter, but a customer who she had mistakenly taken for a waiter. She absently stared at me, and I smirked. Then she took a deep breath and sheepishly said, I was really exhausted that day. I think I must have been a little bit drunk, you know? I would have never have done that if I knew who you were." I patted her arm and replied, "I understand. That happens. Sometimes I'm angry and I do things I shouldn't have done. As long as I'm sorry, everything's okay, right?" She instantly agreed and apologized. However, I could see the coldness in her eyes. Her brilliant smile didn't reach her eyes one bit, and she looked like she was going to kill someone. I waved goodbye, and she came closer to me and whispered, "You wouldn't mention that day in the magazine, right? If you take care of me, I'll take care of you." Then she asked me to sit with her for a few more minutes. She kept saying how funny it is that she thought I was a server. I said nothing at all, and there was an awkwardness in the air. I didn't say anything because I didn't want to make any fake promises. I smiled and returned to the office where I quickly prepared the draft and submitted it to my senior. My senior was extremely happy with how well the interview had turned out. She told me to submit the final interview, which would be released just a day before the elections. We were both ready to drop a bomb before the elections. The day finally arrived. We were getting calls in the morning. I had one missed call from Mrs. Dalton's secretary. We had mentioned every single detail of my first interaction with Mrs. Dalton and even posted a quick video boomerang of her throwing a glass of orange juice on me in the online post. I had never been so happy to be recorded without my knowledge. I finally took the secretary's call, and she asked me if she could arrange a call with Mrs. Dalton. I told her to go ahead. When I took the call, Mrs. Dalton was yelling and crying. She kept asking me to delete the boomerang and to fix our mistakes. I told her that there was no mistake from our side and that everything she did was material for us. People should know the truth, I simply said and cut the phone. I got several threatening messages from her. She basically demanded us to fix everything before the next day, or otherwise she would end my career. I agreed to meet her just to humor myself. We were sitting in the same restaurant and she just kept on insisting how I was making a bad choice and I would end up harming my career if I didn't do something about it soon. Our magazine was way bigger than the mayor and his small group of followers. I asked her to go ahead. She couldn't do anything because that article was a hit. There was no way the superiors would withdraw that article. I didn't hear from her the next day or any day after that. Her husband easily lost the election, and a newspaper claimed that they had been separated after the incident. Nobody knows for sure, but I have heard that Mrs. Dalton hasn't visited her favorite restaurant in a long time. This happened over a year ago when I was working as a waiter in a restaurant. First of all, I need to put on some context. The ruling of the store, and let's name her Diane. When I started to work there, they explained to me my benefits. One of them was staff food. Free staff food every day, and on every Tuesday and Thursdays, we could order some items on the menu with a 50% discount if we wanted to have something nice to eat, or just chose to go with the free staff meal. To do so in the system, we would open a table in our name. The table Michael, for example, order what we want, and the managers would close the table with the 50% discount and keep the due money from the tips. Fair enough. Keep this in your mind for later. Now, let's introduce you to Diane. Diane was a veteran waitress working there 4 to 5 years in the store when I had started. She knew everything very well and was honestly good at her job. She befriended the managers, she was appreciated by the owner. On my first days, Diane looked nice to me, always smiling and friendly. The thing is, over the years, I realized that Diane was a two-faced girl. She would be very friendly to you and complain about you behind your back. We had a Facebook group where all the waiters and managers were added, and she would very often complain about the job not being done correctly. She was mostly working morning shifts, so she would mostly work alone, serve the few tables she had in the daytime, and wait for the night shift to change her. On weekends, she would not be alone, so some of us would also be mornings. Here is her beautiful portrait. She would try to be very bossy with her coworkers, including me. She would devalue the work of everyone else, so she would make it look like she was the only one working hard. She would message the managers about her coworkers and why one or the other should be fired. She would ask the managers to reprimand us if we were late, 5 minutes. She herself sometimes would come 45 minutes late for work. Managers would come on opening time and see if everything was done correctly, forcing us to open without her on the weekends. She would befriend the managers but talk crap about them to us, telling us that they had no idea how to run the store. A lovely person. Everyone in the store, managers and owner excluded, wanted her out of the team. She was hated and a nightmare to work with. They literally gave her only morning shifts to avoid people working with her and create problems. After 2 years in the store, I knew the job very well and was not considered a beginner anymore by anybody. I knew everything I had to do and good at my job as well. I could literally run the store alone, outside the management work, of course. One day, she tried to boss me around by giving me orders which I ignored, because I knew where my priorities had to be. She didn't like that at all, and I loved it. The more she would ask me to do something, the more I'd do everything but that. In the end of the shift, she went to speak with the manager about me, then to my coworker, let's name him Tony, who then came to repeat to me what she had said. She told him that she would try to do everything in her power to get me fired, to which I replied, very pissed, "All right, so let's talk about the fact that you're paying for her food for at least 2 years now." Tony was very confused by what I just told him and asked me what I meant by that. See, from when I started and over the past 2 years, I saw regularly Diane finishing her shifts and bringing home takeaway orders that everyone assumed was her discount staff food. The thing is, I noticed that the ticket from her food in the kitchen didn't have her name on it, but a table number, and that was closed as cash payment in the system. The thing is, if the table is marked as paid, but the money is missing from the tills, managers would take the missing money from the shared tip to pay what is due. So ultimately, we would all pay for the food that she ordered. Back then, I remember asking her about it, and she replied something like, "Don't worry about it. Managers know it's okay." I didn't believe her, but being the new guy, I didn't want to create any trouble. I just let it be. And for over 2 years, she just ordered and ordered. I don't really know why I didn't say anything, but I guess it just became a habit to see her leaving with takeaways, and not being a troublemaker, I kept my mouth shut. Plus, she was friends with the managers, which was intimidating enough. Tony was stunned that I never said anything about this, since absolutely everyone was waiting for anything to get her fired. I apologized and I told him to just observe her and look carefully at what she was bringing home. Guess what? The very next day, Tony caught her. He checked what she was bringing home, checked in the system, and confronted her. She started stuttering and panicking, trying to quickly get out of the situation, and then just headed home. Tony then told the managers what had happened. He confronted her by text messages. She tried to play it as a misclick, then said that she would pay it, but nothing could trick the managers. She lasted until the end of the week and then got removed from the team. We shared her tips and rejoiced over our defeated enemy in the Facebook group. I even took a warning for offering shots to everybody, celebrating her firing. Worth it. Would do again.